Good morning. Hopefully you are having a fantastic day. We certainly are here on 3+U because once again we're outside soaking up the beautiful fall weather it feels like. Senator Bo Watson kicking off the show with us. Good to have you this morning.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
It would be nice if we could have you on the show more often, but I'm thrilled that we get you for the topic you're talking about today, and I think it comes at a great time. A lot of parents are probably home this morning realizing that their kids' schools are either going online, shutting down for a couple of days, things are still strange with COVID, and parents are thinking, what is this doing to my child's learning, particularly reading skills?
Right.
That's your focus next week with the Literacy Summit that you have going on.
That's correct, and you're right. We're really concerned about learning loss. That's one of the reasons we've really pushed to try and keep kids in the classroom as much as we can. We learned from last year that being out of the classroom really has a detrimental effect on their learning. And one of the big strategies that we've had over the past year is how do we address that learning loss, particularly around reading and literacy. As you know, we have struggled in this state, really in this country, to advance our reading skills. Only about 30% of our kids read on grade level. Mm-hmm. That means for an employer trying to recruit people to their business, 7 out of 10 people may not be reading at a level that that employer can use. And so we have to advance and improve our reading. One strategy or one approach to that is using a phonetic approach, which is what the state of Tennessee has adopted. That's what we're teaching in our K-12 schools now.
Can I interrupt you real
Yes.
quickly? You just said that's what the state of Tennessee has adopted. Does that mean that for a while it was not part of the plan?
Well,
or is that too long of a story?
No, well, you raise a really interesting point. So actually for decades, educators have been arguing about the best way to teach reading. And back in the 90s, actually, the argument was settled. There was a real big study that was done, and the phonetic approach is the most effective. It's not the only approach, but it has been seen as the most effective, meaning it reaches the most kids. So back in January of last year, during a special session, the state of Tennessee adopted a literacy training program, which is based on phonetic education. We've spent the past several months educating our teachers on this strategy. What I want to do is bring our community into that conversation so that everyone across the Hamilton County area understands the strategy that we're using at the K-12 level. And if they're doing a reading program in their particular program, then we want them to align with what we're doing all across the state.
Okay, so and I totally interrupted you, and I'm sorry that I did.
That's okay.
But so on September 9th, at the Collegedale Commons, that's when you're having this Literacy Summit. So if I'm understanding you correctly, already the groundwork is in place for the state of Tennessee. There's kind of a strategy that y'all have the framework for, that you're asking not only educators but nonprofits that might have a literacy component to kind of walk alongside with you to implement, right?
Right. So if kids are learning a certain strategy in the school, and then they go to an after-school reading program, or during the summer they're in a reading program, we want to be sure that what they're doing in that program is aligning with what we are doing all across the state. Because again, the strategy here is we have to increase the rate of reading that we have in Tennessee if we're going to be competitive in the economy of the future. We cannot continue to exist at, and it really should be unacceptable to the public, we cannot continue to exist where only 30% of our third graders, 30% of our eighth graders are reading on grade level. We just can't continue to be there.
So if you didn't grow up learning phonics, you might not understand the power it actually brings, and I would think that's part of the challenge, if you will, for the teachers out there that might not have experienced that when they were growing up. They can't know the power of it.
Right, or they went to a teaching or an educational program when they were in college, if they're a teacher, and they were taught a different skill on how to teach kids to read. You know, for me, the number one job, my father used to say to me, keep the main thing the main thing. The number one job of education, and they have a lot of responsibilities, but their number one job is to teach a student to read. Because if a student can learn to read, then education then becomes supplemental to their own personal experience. They can read about and learn about a lot of things without having to have a teacher there. The
Right.
teacher then becomes a supplement to their education. But if a child struggles to read, by the 8th grade, if they're not reading at grade level, then we know those children are at risk to drop out of school. Those children are at risk to have criminal behavior. I mean, there are all kinds of statistics that support the inability to read having a negative impact on the individual.
Okay, I mean, we could have a lot more than the time we had this morning to
We
discuss
could.
this, which is why you've got 2 hours next Thursday. I know what I think I heard you tell me was that you're not asking people to come and just listen to you. You're wanting to hear from them.
Absolutely. This is not a lecture. We do have some experts. We have Commissioner Penny Schwinn, who is the Commissioner of Education for the state of Tennessee, will be there. But this is a conversation. Number one, to make people aware. Number two, to make people aware of the education strategy that we have implemented here in the state of Tennessee, where incidentally we've led the nation in education reform. And number three, to hear what people are doing in the community so we know what our assets are and to try and start to align all these different strategies.
So, is there any finding that's answerable in the time we have for what it is that keeps children from reading at grade level in 3rd grade and 8th grade? And I'm guessing 3rd grade is because that's kind of the leveling point. Kids are maturing at different rates. By 3rd grade, they're kind of there.
So, like with all things in education, the reasons are there are a multitude of reasons. A multitude of reasons. Some kids don't have books in their home. Some kids don't develop a vocabulary in their home. I mean, ultimately, children's parents are their first teachers. And if we're not reaching them at that early level, I'm talking before pre-K, we already are starting to walk up a mountain. If a child is not reading on grade level by the 4th grade, then statistically they will never read on grade level. Right?
That doesn't mean they can't. That's just statistically.
Right. There are obviously we have people who did not learn to read who become adult readers later in life, but the large proportion of students who are not reading on grade level by the 4th grade will not read on grade level. Right? And so what you see is in Tennessee, roughly 35% of children read on grade level in the 3rd grade. When they get to the 8th grade, 27% are reading on grade level because the vocabulary gets bigger, the language gets more challenging and complex. There is a saying in education that up to 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you read to learn. And you know, the public really needs to focus in, and I'm trying to draw a really bright light on this issue because I believe that fundamentally, if we can crack this nut, we can make tremendous progress in our educational system. Now, I am not a pie in the sky. I'm pretty much a realist. This is a really heavy lift for this community, right? We have been wrestling with the reading problems in this country since the 1950s. You may remember a book was written back in 1955 called Why Johnny Can't Read. Right?
Okay.
There was a subsequent book written, Why Johnny Still Can't Read. This is a real challenge for us both locally, but as across the state, as well as across the country. I can't fix everything across the state. I can't fix everything across the United States. But I think those of us in Hamilton County who really focus on this, we can make a difference in this county. And if we can improve reading in a single individual, then we have improved their chances of, however they measure success, we've improved their chances for success in their life.
Is there a correlation between technology and this pullback in reading level?
No, again, we have been challenged with reading since the 50s.
Okay.
Right? People have romantic memories of the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. But if you were to actually look at the data, okay, we were struggling with this even then. Okay? And we know that kids who fall behind in reading, fall behind in school, and ultimately become our greatest challenge to keep in school.
So you're asking people to RSVP. It's a free event, but you just want to know who to expect, correct?
Correct, and how many? The Collegedale Commons is a great open space for those who might be concerned about that. But we want to know how many folks will be there, and this is really focused at people who are engaged in doing some kind of reading program, not necessarily part of the K-12 education system,
right,
but a nonprofit or another organization like that that is providing structured reading instruction to students.
Thanks for bringing it our way, and thanks for your passion on the subject.
Yeah, I get pretty heated up about it,
That's
so thank you for having me.
Your phone number to call is 648-7341. Is the Literacy Summit happening next Thursday, September 9th at the College Jail Commons. Back after this.
Any type of car wreck is tragic, but the most unforgiving involve those with large 18-wheeler or commercial vehicles.